Good afternoon, dear friends, dear ladies and gentlemen. I would also like to greet you at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. Particular words of gratitude I would like to address to my colleagues, the leaders of the countries who came to this beautiful city. Today, based on some understandable reasons, I'm going to primarily talk about Russia, about the positive changes which Russia was able to attain, about the kind of economy which our people require, and the way I see this country in several years, and what is necessary to do for that purpose. I am going to talk about the vision for the development of the country, which will come true thanks to the common efforts undertaken by the whole of the Russian society. And no kinds of projects can come true if they are not required by the whole society. And this project must be implemented irrespective of who will come into which office in this country within the next few years. I am accountable for that personally as the president of the country, and my colleagues who, together with, we are implementing the program of modernization. I shall start from what already has been done during the existence of the new Russian state as well as during the recent period. This year, New Russia celebrates its 25th anniversary. After the collapse of the Soviet Union and its centrally planned economy, this country has undertaken an enormous progress in its development. The share of private sector during those days was close to zero. Right now, it amounts to more than 60%. The government debt, and I shall remind the figures, during those periods exceeded the annual GDP. Right now, it went down almost to 10% of the GDP. Hyperinflation, which then was taking on enormous proportions, changed itself into a moderate price growth. Real consumption by the Russian household doubled. During a very short historic period, Russia instituted reforms that very few can compare in terms of the scale. From the government prices, we came to a standard market pricing mechanism, from strict control over the currency market to one of the most liberal models of its regulation in the world, from a closed country to foreign capital to 300 billion accumulated foreign investment. We were creating our tax system from scratch, and I shall remind us that in Russia right now has one of the lowest corporate and individual income taxes. For the purpose of incentivizing long-term investments, starting from this year, we freed from taxation the capital gains tax. One can enumerate a lot of things. It is always pleasant to tell one about things that have been done, but the most important thing is that consistently and in a systemic way, as what we could afford, we're moving on, being aware that there are problems and obstacles in our way. We understand that without winning over corruption, without effective government public policy, without good quality financial system, we won't overcome this excessive resource dependence and won't achieve high quality of life. The course for modernization, it became a response to many an issue, and that's exactly why we launched the project of modernizing national economy, defining technology priority for the next few years, setting the task of turning Moscow into one of the biggest international financial centers. One should admit that modernization is not easy, but from the very beginning we were aware that that is exactly the way it will go. But to wait and identify certain other time frames was something that we simply didn't have the right to. And we started acting. And in any case, the policy of modernization is bearing its first, although maybe little, fruits. During the past few months, projects within priority sectors have started worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Russia is something that practically all of the major global pharma and energy companies came to as strategic investors. During 3 years, the number of Russian households who have have access to the broadband internet has doubled. Successful IPOs of Russian internet companies took place, and the total capitalization right now is measured with dozens of billions of dollars. Russia has maintained and strengthened its leadership created by the launching of the first Sputnik into the space and the breakthrough of Yuri Gagarin 50 years ago. Our country is #1 in terms of the spacecraft a year, in terms of the launching spacecraft a year. And we are completing the creation of the national navigation system, which is GLONASS, which gradually is the system that the world is starting to use. And finally, today, Russia is building nuclear stations using technologies which already comply to post-Fukushima requirements, meaning the enhanced safety requirements. And I mention it as the technology priority because I believe this is where modernization of the economy should manifest itself. And what we intend to do is not just the innovation center in Skolkovo, not just changing the redundant technologies into a new one in a number of priority sectors. That is self-evident. Such projects are the sparks which set into motion the mechanism for much larger scale changes, for growing the dynamics in such changes. And these pilot projects ought to demonstrate how one should work today. We started disseminating best practices throughout the whole country, and that goes for an over-the-counter use of new technologies, instruments for the support of research and innovation, standards for technical regulations, customs clearance, immigration rules, and many, many other things, including the quality of government management at the regional level. There took place certain HR changes, and in order for the changes to be faster during the past 2 years, I have quite considerably renewed the leadership core in the Russian regions. New, very ambitious leaders became governors, and that already improves the business environment. And I would just quote as an example one city, which is Moscow. A recently appointed team already reduced the number of procedures required to start a construction project twofold, and that was a very hurting thing for the development of our capital city. And I would like to say that these are just first few results of modernization. An achievement of its objectives is a difficult and complex problem, but I am absolutely sure that success is achievable. Dear colleagues, now a few words about the way we are going to minimize external risks. The global financial crisis led to an appearance of significant financial disbalances in a number of countries, including European countries and the United States. An appearance of new bubbles can happen practically in any market, and we saw it absolutely clearly that in today's global financial system, these bubbles burst in such a way that it throws the whole planet into quake. The need to reduce budget deficits may bring about slowing of the economic development and consequently the demand for the Russian goods. Investors will be looking for the ways to diversify their investments, and whether they're going to select our country to a very large extent depends upon our own selves. Russia must propose new opportunities, from the growing consumer demand to dozens of infrastructure projects, as well as demonstrate which are the new opportunities related to the creation of a single economic space with our neighbors. I would like to emphasize this should make us into one of the biggest and most attractive markets in the world. The normal development of the global economy is hindered by an excessive volatility of commodity markets, and we saw it through our own example. One should not always count upon high oil prices, and particularly their continued growth. Yes, indeed, the kind of an upheaval that is taking place in Asia, and that our Minister for Economic Development mentioned, the conflict in the Middle East and Northern Africa, the consequences of the Japanese catastrophe, all of it led to higher commodity prices. But the reliance upon the price environment is totally out of our long-term list of goals. This is an absolutely banal thing, but we ought to live according to our means, trying to at least save some of our income from the excessive oil prices. The excessive current application of such windfall money against the backdrop of faster global inflation is a very risky policy. It doesn't allow us to reduce interest rates and dramatically increase the investment activity. The Minister of Finance is nodding in response actively. Much more significant integration of the Russian economy into the global one. This is also one of the alternative-free scenarios. The businesses have a saying, markets like parachutes. They work only when they are opened, unfolded. And so we, without an open economy, will plummet. And it will really hurt much. That is why we're going to reduce barriers for foreign investments, and we would plan to complete the Russian accession to the WTO, and then to the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. As far as WTO is concerned, I believe that it is real to finish this work this year, if certainly no political games resume. We have been ready to join WTO more than many other countries, the big ones and little ones, and everybody is aware of it quite well. But indecent number of concessions is something they're trying to squeeze us for, and such an approach is unacceptable, and such openly disadvantageous decisions is something that Russia won't go for. If our partners are not ready for a fair Russia's accession to WTO, this is going to be a poor scenario, and we need to avoid it. One way or another, separate political and economic interests must not hinder our successful development. Russia, in its best way, will also utilize its positions in the international institutions. We're part of G8, and we take the responsibility for resolving global security problems, for facilitating the development of the poorer states of the world. And as part of the BRICS Forum, Russia is one of the fastest growing countries interested, amongst other things, in a much more stable financial architecture, in bringing about modern management technologies, and in making the international economic system more democratic. Much more active application of ruble, RMB, and other emerging currencies apparently will turn the international financial currency system into much more flexible and comfortable for investors to operate within. I will note another thing. Being able to work within these two formats would immediately create an opportunity for Russia to act as a bridge to harmonize different positions, and for more effective work of the most influential right now economic forum, which is the G20. The initiatives which were proposed by Russia already broadly being debated in the most authoritative international fora. We are very happy for that, and that goes for the nuclear safety and security, as well as the safety and security of the production of offshore oil. We have formulated our ideas about the new rules for the IP property circulation because of the way the internet is developing, and the basic idea is in the new role of the copyright holders when defining the ways to protect their IP products. These topics, just separate examples of our joint work, and I believe that today it is important to achieve new quality in our agreements between the leading nations about the common principles of the development of the economic policy, modernize multi-party conventions, and Russia will play the role of one of the key moderators in this process. I would like to separately note the positive role played for the sake of the global stability and security by our biggest neighbor, which is the People's Republic of China. Strategic partnership between Russia and China helps to turn the world simultaneously into a more stable place, as turn it into a more dynamically developing world. Now, dear colleagues, about the strategy for the development of this country and about the goals of the strategy that we've mentioned more than once. And therefore, I would like to focus today more upon our actions, which is more important. One of the most well-known innovators of the world, Steve Jobs, once said that the important decisions are not the ones which you act upon, but the ones which you decide not to implement. And I would like to state here very clearly that we are not building a government capitalism. Yes, we had a stage of development related to strengthening the role of the government in the economy. It was essentially an inevitable phase and very necessary during a certain period. It was important to stabilize the situation after the chaos of the 90s and to set an elementary order in place. However, right now the potential for this way is exhausted. The effectiveness, which could be quite conditional for such economic model, very strongly depends upon the environment and often leads to poorly thought out steps, erratic steps, which gain only one thing: preserve what's already there. And almost all the time, irrespective of the effectiveness of such a heritage. The government still owns a big number of economic assets, from companies to land mass. But all the rest of the assets as well are still being influenced in a definitive way, the excessive system of the government regulation in the captive sectors. In the first place, in the natural monopoly sectors. And any uncertainty found in law is the risk borne by an entrepreneur, but not by the government. And the principle of the government being always right is either manifested in corruption or in over-the-counter preferences to crony companies, irrespective of the form of proprietorship. Under such conditions, these are not the market institutions which operate, but the principles of manual control. But their efficiency is not only strongly limited, but very discriminate in the quality of the managing economy. And democracy under such a system very often reminds one of a well-known joke about the way computer systems develop. Yes, the old errors were eliminated, but some brand new ones added to it. And as a result, the domination of the government captive companies in a significant number of industries, low entrepreneurial and investment activity in these areas. And in the end of the day, the threat of losing competitiveness for the whole Russian economy, which won't be prevented even the kind of words that some of the experts may find very nice to their ears, like the 5-year economic periods. Such an economic model poses a threat to the future of the country. And this is not my choice. My choice is different. The Russian economy must have in it dominating private entrepreneurship and private investors. The government must protect the choice and the property of those who conscientiously risk their money and their reputation. It must provide such people the right to make a mistake as well as give an opportunity to act in a driving, ambitious and daring way. And the government companies must ensure contemporary stable infrastructure for the development of the overall economy. The government in the similar way should create such a system of social security and public services which would incentivize Russian households to grow their number of children, to maintain a healthy way of life, to a continued education, and ultimately to a long and fruitful employment. And here we will have to do a lot of things still in order to get rid of the heritage of the previous system where distribution mechanism coexists for the chosen ones, and the minimum risk as well as a minimum ration, which made all the rest equal in their poverty and suppression. In other words, my choice is the policy which would ensure maximum opportunity for the economic activity of the millions of our citizens. The citizens who are protected by the law and the whole might of the government power. My choice is for Russia to see within the next 10 years the appearance of the economy of the high quality of life, the economy which will turn our life into a comfortable and exciting one, the economy which will create the things which would enable us to stay within the top leaders of the world, which, to my mind, simply having healthy people, clean energy, intellectual network, electronic services, comfortable transportation, affordable housing, good quality education, and favorable environment for everyone, and first and foremost for children, for the disabled, and for our seniors. We can afford today not to try and catch up somebody, but to create new technological order. And we're moving towards such an economy, which is based upon the next generation of technologies, reliant upon major competitive companies, competitive in the global markets, and a broad number of medium and small-sized companies of an innovative nature, amongst other things. If we become the law setters in such important issues, which we maintain, and if we expand our big intellectual human capital, I'm convinced that Russia will stay amongst the leaders of the global economic growth. My choice is serious renewal of not only old redundant elements in the economy, but all of the public institutions. Here, it is necessary not only to very specifically institute changes, but also to undertake systemic decisions. We should not delay saying goodbye to many a bad habit. It is improper for us to target only relaxed and evenly paced growth. This is a mistake. Behind the infamous stability, another stagnation may be hiding. So we need to decisively and quickly change everything that is in the way for the breakthrough development. And these things mentioned constitute the basis of the strategy which I formulated during the 3 years of my presidential office, and which today is broadly known as the program of Russian modernization. I am convinced that this is the most state-of-the-art and the most worthy policy for Russia, and we can change the situation for the better quality in the next 2 years. Our main activities for that purpose will be aimed at the following objectives: to dramatically improve the investment and entrepreneurial environment for the purpose of creating highly productive workplaces in all of the regions in the country, for a good quality progress in fighting corruption, in creating the modern police and other law enforcement structures, in improving the efficiency of the judicial system, and finally, at modernizing the government itself, embedding into it the modern project-based approaches and decentralizing the authority. By the end of March, in the city of Magnitogorsk, I issued a task aimed at improving the quality of market institutions, at reducing the costs for business and bringing investments into the Russian economy. In politics, it is very important to bring your decisions all the way to practical application, and the Magnitogorsk initiatives are already being implemented. A decision was made, after quite a continuous debate, to reduce the maximum rate of mandatory insurance contributions starting from next year from 34 down to 30%, and for the small business in production area and social area down to 20%. This is certainly not a dramatic reduction, but very beneficial measure for a great number of small and medium-sized companies, and I believe that this decision for this transitional period is a fair and a very balanced one. Besides, a decision was prepared which would also narrow the area of control over the strategic foreign investments, as well as would ensure access for minority shareholders to the information about the work of the public companies. We have investment ombudsman now in our federal district. Mobile hotline of the presidential office is also working. The draft federal act was prepared, which institutes a special order of reviewing claims which accuse somebody of corruption. Practically, we have completed changing the high government officials for non-executive directors in the key government companies. In all of the joint stock companies controlled by the government, this particular process will be completed in the autumn of this year. We have established the Russian Direct Investment Fund Management Company. The federal budget has about $2 billion allocated for setting its first statutory capital. We held negotiations with the key potential partners. Interest from them is very strong, and within the next few months we will start reviewing specific projects. The discussion of these Magnitogorsk initiatives demonstrated a very high demand for very quick and practical decisions, and that is no accident, because the task of modernization can be achieved not just by one-off, maybe dramatic action, but only as long as there is a continued flow of changes undertaken, as well as an existence of political will to move this process forward in a predictable, step-by-step way. And within this context, I believe that it is worthwhile today to undertake some new steps. Which are those? Firstly, the government doesn't require such large mass of property. The government has submitted its ideas about the schedule for privatization of major companies. Implementation of these plans is definitely necessary, but these plans are very modest. I believe it is justified to give up on controlling as well as the blocking shares of stock in many major companies which currently are owned by the government. a more cautious approach will be required with respect to infrastructure monopolies and the companies which are necessary to ensure military security of the country, defense security of the country. The government, before August 1st, will have to adjust the scale of privatization in order to resolve this. And I'm sure that we will be able to do privatization following contemporary, transparent rules in order to attract effective private investors and generate sufficient amount of funds for the Russian budget. Second thing, the federal nature of this country must be the driving factor for the development of this diverse country and promote our competitive advantage. In the contemporary world, it is impossible to manage the whole country out of one place, particularly when we're talking about such a country as Russia. I will tell even more words about it. If everything starts moving or working only if commanded from the Kremlin, and I know this because we went through that experience, it means that such a system is not resilient, is not able to persevere, and it has to be adapted to a specific person, and this is bad. It means that the system has to be overhauled, and very soon I'm going to create a highly placed working group which will prepare proposals to decentralize authority between the levels of government in favor of municipalities in the first place, covering the issues of respective adjustment of the national tax system and the principles of the inter-budgetary fiscal relationship. I believe that such decisions would be more conducive to the future development of the Russian economy. The third thing, there is a need to undertake additional steps to improve the quality of the work of our judicial authorities. In this area, there are quite a few problems, a lot is being written about them, and we know them only quite well. And not only we know them, but we are capable of sorting things out with them without any external help. And I'm confident that, in the first place, the judicial community will do it itself. Many today are proposing, and I every now and then receive such letters, to set up a special court, essentially a special judicial system for foreign investors. I don't believe this is right. Unbiased, fair, effective court is something that everybody requires, the citizens of this country, any organization, any individual. That is exactly the way we're going to work on that issue. But at the same time, we shall incentivize better specialty in terms of the training of the judiciary, develop the mediation, and improve the quality of our judges. I believe that the judicial corps is something that new people should come to with the expertise of working in different legal areas, and in order to turn this process into a more significant one, soon we're going to make the necessary decisions. I would also task to think about the possibility of tendering the judges so as to recruit them and make them accountable. And consequently, we have the qualification boards of respective levels, and I believe it would be better balanced to distinguish such functions between these qualification boards as well as the regional, court presence. That is a very special issue, but a very important one. The fourth thing. Words about corruption suffocating the Russian economy is something that we hear constantly. The answer is evident, and it should be, as they say, very symmetrical. The choke on the neck of the corruption must be tightened without any stopping. But corruption is very difficult to discover. The existing order of the criminal persecution of corruption is very slow and very complicated. It should be maintained, at least for the clear guarantees to be there in case there is some unjustified accusations, some things which also unfortunately happen often. At the same time, the government should be purged from corruption quicker and in a more decisive way. And for that purpose, we should enhance the basis for the dismissal from the government office those who are suspected of corruption. And we could have as a basis information which was received as a result of investigative activity, even if they were formalized in such a way that could not be applied for any criminal persecution. Essentially, that will be a dismissal because of the loss of trust as the basis to terminate official employment. And And at the same time, there is a need to maintain the judicial order through which such dismissal can be repealed. And I should think that we should institute the full proprietary accountability before the government, which before then has compensated losses and damages of an individual which was brought about by illegal activity or the lack of activity on the part of such government officials. So, generally speaking, we should squeeze and chase out all those who disrespect the law and who do not respect the integrity of their colleagues. And there are quite a few people around like that. And unfortunately, such are found also in the law enforcement system. And specifically, I'm talking about the kind of investigators who turn the ungrounded criminal case into an instrument of corporate raiding and into some sort of a business for themselves. One should use the institution of a mandatory prosecutor's verification for cases which will go through the court. And in case some abuse is uncovered, prosecutor will be able to criminally prosecute an investigator. Respective amendments into the law I'm going to submit into the Russian parliament in the very near future. Fifth, it is necessary for us not only to talk about beautiful plans, but also to achieve a significant progress in developing a financial center in Moscow. For that purpose, many important changes in the legislation are going to be submitted this year. The Moscow government, within the same period of time, will put together a package of basic programs which would alter the life in the city. In terms of some other issues, for example, in terms of the circulation of the Russian securities abroad, we would also be making some decisions in the very near future. And the last thing, we're trying to achieve a visa-free regime with European Union and other countries, but a lot here depends upon our partners. However, we are ready to demonstrate not only our goodwill to resolve this issue, but also demonstrate an ability to undertake very specific steps, so it would make it possible for long-term visas to be received by all investors and businessmen who have considerable business interests in Russia, including those who are involved in the Innovation Skolkovo projects and the International Financial Center projects in Moscow. And finally, in order to improve the development of the Moscow megapolis for the purpose of financial center project and simply to ease the life for a great number of people, we may also consider the possibility to expand the boundaries of the city of Moscow, meaning to say to create the capital city federal district, which would go beyond the traditional boundaries of the city of Moscow and move outside of those boundaries a considerable number of the government institutions and agencies. Dear friends, dear colleagues, I quoted a number of very specific measures, and I'm sure that they are going to be implemented, but it doesn't mean that their list is exhaustive. These measures should be continuously improved, and I'm sure that all the strategic objectives we're setting ourselves will be achieved. There is no doubt about it. And in the foundation of such confidence is the fact that we are striving to achieve development, new quality of life, to winning over corruption and unfairness. And that unites the whole of the Russian society, and we will act in one common effort. In order to implement this uniting strategy, there will be a need to institute changes in the structure of the government as well as other levels of authority. We need to ensure greater openness of the government and broad opportunities for private businessmen, to do our best to maintain modernization locally, public initiatives, and an ability for those who are not indifferent to unite, those who are trying to change the life for the better in their little township or city. Our well-known historian Nikolai Karamzin used to say that love for one's own good breeds within us love for our homeland, while self-esteem engenders the national pride, which is the buttress for patriotism. I believe that these words reflect the target for national development that currently Russia faces. I am far from having an illusion about the whole Russian economy becoming a different one within the next few years. But within a relatively short period of time, we must go beyond the point of no return, over to the models which lead this country in a different direction. And whatever we are planning, we will definitely do and achieve step by step, consistently, without turning back. And the corruption, the closeness of the country and society for investment, the excessive role of the government in the economy, and over-centralization, excessive centralization. These are the taxes on the future which we should eliminate, and we will eliminate them, while the rest, the people in this country will do themselves, for themselves. And I mean, for Russia, they will achieve their own success, and that would mean the success for the whole of this nation. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you an enjoyable and successful forum. Thank you.